Welcome back to the Art of Actual Change. I'm your host, Derek Nielsen, former health specialist turned wildlife, conservation, fine art photographer. Through my many travels around the world, I've met some people who are doing some fascinating work outside themselves to make this planet a better place to live. Each episode, I'll be bringing you these people, letting them tell their stories, and hopefully you'll find inspiration in these stories so that you can go out and make an actual change in your world or the world around you. Welcome back, everyone, to the Art of Actual Change. I have an awesome guest today. His name is Tim Spalla. He is the co-founder of the Horn of Africa Conservation Alliance. Did I get that right, Tim?
Yeah.
He is a wildlife investigative, just an investigator of illegal traffic of animals across Africa. And I just want to introduce Tim. I find his work incredibly important. It's the sort of work that people back here in the United States or in Europe may not know about what's happening because it's in a different continent and they're not directly impacted by it. But without further ado, Tim, this is amazing work you're doing. I really appreciate it, man. So tell me a little bit about your work and how you got into that.
Great. Well, thanks, Derek. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and share a little bit about what we're doing overseas. I guess a little background about me, just to get you started with some context. So I'm a Midwest kid. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, surrounded by farm animals and nature and all that kind of stuff. And we pretty much lived out in the sticks. So that was my environment growing up. Didn't have a whole lot of human friends, so I made a lot of friends with animals.
You and me both. That's exactly that was like my background too. Was like just chasing frogs and snakes around, and before
running through the woods, playing in the creek, the whole thing. So anyway, that's kind of how life was growing up for me. Obviously, a lot of farm work mixed in there as well, but grew up in a really small rural area. Ended up going to University of Northern Iowa and graduated first time around with a BA in history. It was around about that time. I think I was a sophomore at UNI, and my second oldest brother was part of the Iraq invasion. And my oldest brother was an Army Ranger. My youngest brother was in the Air Force. My dad was a Marine. It's all this military kind of stuff. And
it's pretty.
I had
background.
Stiff-armed it as long as I could, and then it kind of was like, man, I think I'm gonna have to do the military thing. So and that's kind of like began the journey for me. I did a lot of
what service did you serve in? What was your
so I actually enlisted in the Army, and I was one of those guys that was lucky enough to get a Ranger contract. So basically I just went down to the recruiter station. I was like, man, you don't have to convince me of nothing. I want to go. I want to go to Baghdad as quickly as I can, thinking in my mind, maybe I could get there where my brother was there or still there. And I want to be an Army Ranger. So if you can make those things happen, this would be the easiest recruitment you've ever had to do. And he's like, I'll give it a try. So, we worked through all of that, ended up getting everything kind of squared away. Had an amazing last couple of years at university. Ended up picking up a degree in anthropology, did a bunch of hippie backpacking around Central South America, like just really opened my eyes to a ton of things coming from the farm, just didn't have a lot of that exposure. And,
so far we're 2 for 2. That was like my introduction to travel and wildlife. I spent some time backpacking around South America. So
awesome. Oh, it's fantastic. Man, that place has a hold on my heart. I actually took my wife down there a couple years ago. I think this was before we got married, and we backpacked Patagonia. We drove 1,000 miles on the Carretera Austral down in Chile when it was still gravel. It was just amazing. And then a couple of years spent traveling around Mexico, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, all those kinds of places, El Salvador. Just a wanderlust college kid trying to find himself kind of thing. And then let's see, I graduated in 2005. Like just a couple weeks after that, I was already on a plane headed to South Carolina, which is where I did my basic, and followed a military career that was really interesting and a ton of exposure to a ton of different things. As I mentioned, I enlisted with the Ranger contract, so my whole plan was to get into to be an airborne Ranger thing and try to live up to my brother's example that he set for us and everything. So did all the schools, did airborne school, did Ranger indoctrination program. Got my battalion was actually out in Fort Lewis, which is outside of Tacoma, Washington. So I also had this beautiful experience in the Northwest.
It's so gorgeous up there.
Oh my God, it's fantastic. I think about Portland every day. It feels like Ashley and I, my wife Ashley and I talk about it constantly. That if I could relocate us anywhere and be back to the Northwest. Had a really just interesting military career. So I was an Army Ranger, but my specialty was intelligence. So it was kind of like two sides. Wasn't an infantry guy. I wasn't what you would consider to be like movie screen Army Ranger guy. I was more like the intelligence guy. So I was everything behind the scenes. And then had a couple of deployments where we, had quite a few, operations and missions you go out on and just to see the whole picture. That's what I felt like I came away with was I gained a really deep understanding of how intelligence works and how you locate and disrupt criminal networks. Wow. In the case of the military, it was terrorist networks. But I got this really fundamental education in countering criminal activity and how you can do that. There was a couple of rotations, a couple of deployments where we were out there and we were just hammering these Al-Qaeda elements throughout the country. And when we went out there, our mission was to go after the worst of the worst guys. So we had, everyone from the leader of Al-Qaeda down to suicide, cell leadership and stuff like that, and everything in between, the logistics, the communications, that whole thing. I saw it all and I learned to work with it and manipulate it and shape things and basically figure out what a problem was and then go in and shape the solution that I wanted to that problem. And obviously it helped, having 50 badass Rangers that can go out and action any target, that you find. And so I ended up doing 5 combat deployments to Iraq with the Rangers. In that time was a Ranger School graduate. One of the honors of my life has been getting to serve in the Ranger Regiment as a non-commissioned officer. And which is, I still think about that every day, just having Rangers, soldiers underneath me that I was responsible for training and mentoring and taking care of them. And then teaching them how to do this work, especially when they would be asked to do this work, in a combat theater, which is just a pretty sobering responsibility.
That's a huge responsibility.
But again, it prepared me, and I guess all of this for context of how I ended up where I'm at right now. It prepared me for a lot of the work that was to come in my life. I got out of the Rangers in 2009, and then I transitioned from there down to a unit in Fort Bragg, a special operations intelligence unit. And from there, life just really blasted off like a rocket. My first assignment was in East Africa and Yemen. Okay. And that's where I basically cut my teeth on everything Africa. I'd never even been to Africa in my life before.
Yeah. And so this is with the military, right? This is
yep. So at this point I was a defense contractor. Gotcha. Working with a special operations unit. And basically our job was to find Al Shabaab guys and do what you do to them kind of thing. So, spent a lot of time traveling throughout Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, along the coastline there, Yemen. Had some of the most profound, life-altering experiences in those couple of years. I mean,
I can
it
imagine.
really, it took what I was exposed to in Iraq and just blew the top off. Like,
Wow.
I honestly, I felt like, you know, some kind of Jason Bourne kind of guy. And
how do you real quick, I mean, to not take a sidetrack, but like, how do you come back to the United States and have a dinner party with people and not just like,
you
know
don't.
what I mean?
You don't, although some guys certainly could. I personally, my journey was a little bit more complicated. I never really came back. Like physically, I'd come back to the States, but I just was waiting to get the hell out and go back to work again. Like through the process of that, I would say the military, active duty military, and then transitioning into this unit, I just totally and utterly gave my life over to that work. Like nothing else mattered. No relationship lasted, no hobby lasted. I didn't really enjoy anything when I'd come home and just be like, man, this place sucks, or it's boring, or there's nothing to do here. So you get like so conditioned, and it feels so. The surprising thing is, as crazy as all those experiences were, they felt more normal and real to me than like coming back and sitting on the couch in North Carolina watching TV.
I feel that too when coming back from some of the places I've been traveling. And I feel like there should be like a place you should go to like buffer between that world and this world over here. It's just like the things that are going on in your life here suddenly seem to not matter as much. And you know, the relationships still count, but like just the possessions, the things that people get caught up in, it's just like it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like when you're living, like in my case, you're living in a stick hut in Somalia, it's hard to come back here and relate. And that actually was gonna follow me throughout most of my career. As a matter of fact, it's been something that has played a really big role in my life after that period. So I got out of, I really didn't get out of that work until about 2015. And prior to that, I had done everything from chasing the LRA guys with, intelligence teams, chasing Lord's Resistance Army and Coney all throughout Central Africa. We did a lot of work in West Africa, targeting Al Qaeda. And we supported the French invasion in 2015. It was just, we did the Chibok girls, the kidnapping in Nigeria. Supporting all that stuff. And when I think about it now, it's hard to like go back there and be like, wow, I can't believe I did all that stuff. Or I was involved.
Yeah, you guys should be proud of yourselves for sure.
Yeah. Well, we had pretty incredible people. And I would be lying if I never did anything more than serve on a team of just fantastic individuals that are, to this day, some of the most inspiring and capable human beings in the face of utter insanity.
You have to do that kind of work.
Come across. Yeah, for sure. But then actually it was 2015 when I just kind of like, I was married at the time. I was expecting my firstborn, Harrison, and I was living in North Carolina with my wife, Ashley, and we kind of just were getting burned out with the deployments. I would leave every 2 months and kind of fall into a hole and not come back out until the deployment was over, and then come home and all these.
Hi, how's life?
And learning some very hard lessons about what it means to do that kind of work while trying to be in a relationship and trying to maintain a marriage and trying to maintain a home life and trying to raise kids and all this kind of stuff. Like if I could tell you how many marriages that I've watched implode, how many kids grew up without parents, and how many parents that I've worked with overseas that just are dying because they don't get to see their kids, or it's just FaceTime, that kind of stuff. I learned a lot of hard lessons that I observed for quite a few years. And then in about the 2015 timeframe, a lot of that stuff really started hitting home. Like, wow, I can't keep running out the door and doing this stuff and,
Yeah.
you know, be the type of husband that I want to be, or be the type of dad that I want to be, or be a member of my community kind of thing. It had been like a decade where I had really no contact with anyone, friends, family, none of that. So 2015 is when things really started to hit home for me of like, dang, I'm like
Yeah,
30
so
years
you
old.
decided to like, yeah, you decided to like look internally and say, all right, little gut check, like what's important to me, my family, you know, some of the things that I've been
Yeah.
missing. And so during that time, you shifted to the current work, or was there something in between that
Yep.
you got involved with that
No.
led you?
So it was actually during that same process where I say like a process of self-discovery, where I just really started to lose, because I've always had like this desire to like just throw myself into the counterterrorism stuff, like just
Sure.
the idea of, you know, this epic struggle of civilizations and ideologies and all that kind of stuff. I'm a history major. I think I mentioned that. So like,
Yeah,
of
definitely.
course, I just want to throw myself into that, right? And be a
Yeah,
part of
absolutely.
story, right? And but it really started to kind of wane on me. Probably after my 30th deployment, I'm just like, God dang, I'm not making any headway. I personally don't feel like I'm really accomplishing anything. And it seems like some of these missions have just become self-licking ice cream cones. Like I don't even really know why we're in the places doing what we're doing. And why am I, you know, leaving my wife behind and my soon-to-be kid behind for what?
Right.
And so some disillusionment there, and just an idea of like, man, there's got to be something more. And I had a really profound experience in 2014, maybe, or 2013, where I got to go do some field work in Garamba National Park in northern Congo. And it was at the time that we were looking at Coney and the Lord's Resistance Army and basically connecting their elephant poaching and bushmeat poaching activities with like basically the whole criminal organization that was the LRA. And I had the good fortune of connecting with an organization that was working out there at the time called Invisible Children, that also themselves had done just a tremendous amount of work to try to do something about Coney and the Lord's Resistance Army. And it was through that experience, just getting out there, being exposed, talking to the people, like getting to see these elephants, you know, in the wild, and just experiencing and living in that and being immersed in that. You know, I say eating beans and rice 3 times a day, and you know, you need to change, you're eating rice and beans kind of thing. But it grabbed a hold of me, that experience, and it just made me think a lot about how can I transition my skills and my experience into something that could like maybe have an impact on what's happening to like our environments and wildlife and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I barely know anything about animals in a way, like, but I know, like I mentioned earlier, with a lot of the work in Iraq, I know how to like go after criminals and criminal organizations, and I know what to do. Like, the government spent a ton of money on training me, and I was, of course, other guys in my position to do that kind of work. And when I looked around, did my little market research of who's actually in the conservation space with these kinds of skills doing this kind of work, I saw a lot of posers and a lot of people claiming to do something and not actually doing it. And then a lot of people doing something completely counterproductive. And I saw probably more of that than anything else. I saw a lot of scientists and bureaucrats and, you know, nonprofit program administrators trying to do counter wildlife trafficking work. And it struck me as like, wow, if this is what we have to offer, this is gonna end in a disaster. And it was around about that time that you started to get a lot of media around this transition. Like, a lot of military guys were transitioning over to counter poaching. And then there was this pushback because it was this militarization of conservation, and that was increasing risk for everyone. If all these Afghan and Iraq vets want to come in and just start shooting up the place and doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, well, I'm not any of that stuff, right?
I need to find a happy medium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there's a place for that. That's not my place though.
Yeah.
Like the way I looked at the value I could provide would be to work with local governments and communities and basically teach them how to like observe and monitor and report wildlife crime, environmental crime information. And I mean, actually the basis of that is educating them in what those things actually are, what that actually means. There's so many of these places. You take an area like Garamba, I mean, you drive through there and it's like, it doesn't even feel like you're on the same planet. Like there is I mean, it's everything. It's poverty, it's lack of education or lack of access, to education, to economic opportunities. Some of these people don't even know what the world looks like outside, much less have any understanding of, CITES quotas for ivory sales. It's like they don't have any awareness of that, right? I remember talking to one of my guys around about that time. He was from a village in northern Uganda, and I'm just like, man, what is it like? What's it like out in the boonies when you've got like elephants living next door to you, and it's just a fact of life. Like I see them in a zoo, and I'm like, wow,
yeah, they've just always been there, right? And there's like,
up there they just live there. It's like birds or any other animal that just shows up, right? And he's like, it's nothing. It's not a big deal. It's just the way life is. And he's like, and unfortunately, in some of those areas, and he was talking about his village specifically, he's like, man, you could, in exchange for a case of Coca-Cola, someone will go out and kill an elephant for you.
man, yeah,
right? With no awareness that ivory, once it's processed and trafficked and resold in Southeast Asia, that it's worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Man,
like to anybody who has like I shouldn't say that's a very blanket statement, but for most people in Africa, for most people in source areas with the wildlife that's being targeted, they're not aware of the bigger infrastructure that's in place. It has no relevance to them, right? Like worked ivory means nothing to a local villager in northern Uganda, right? Like it just means nothing. It's a huge status symbol in China or Southeast Asia that people will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for. And even they don't really have an understanding of that, value chain from source to their market. But the guys at the source have really no awareness. They can't even imagine what life could be like, right? In like a first world economy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all that to say, like, I just started to really get a more fundamental understanding of how the criminal component is a layer over some of like the environmental crisis, situations that we're encountering, right? And I should say, criminal elements are not the only threat to wildlife. Urban expansion, sprawl, whatever you want to call it, pollution, climate change, like all these things are just disastrous and catastrophic,
right,
for wildlife, especially at-risk wildlife.
Yeah.
And the criminal component is really just a layer of that. And in many ways, it's taking advantage of those dynamics. And for a lot of people that are in that chain, they don't have any alternatives. Like if you're starving and, poaching a pangolin is going to get you $50 from a construction crew that's working on a road nearby. There's no question, right?
Yeah,
there's no question. So,
and I was reading in the article that you were actually the most recent in September issue of National Geographic that a lot of a big problem in the area that you were doing your investigation on the cheetah poaching and trafficking was that the region is experiencing such elongated droughts, and then you have a typhoon or a storm come in and wipe out a big portion of the cattle and the herd animals that these people use as their resources. And with the loss of predatory animals such like the warthogs and other, the cheetahs are now having to find other
They
sources
have to
of food.
supplement their diet, right?
Right, because the grazing animals can't graze on the grasslands because the grasslands are drying up and they're not exactly there. So yeah, it's super complicated. And complex.
There are so many layers, and when you take the case of the Horn of Africa in particular, you have decades of conflict, decades of political, ethnic, cultural conflict. I mean, most of that region is just wrecked, right? Mostly from us, right?
Yeah.
From humans. And then when you take that into account, that's putting pressure on the native wildlife. In the case of cheetahs in particular, as their habitat shrinks, their contact with humans and human activity is increasing. As we encroach on their habitats, on their ranges, it's inevitable, right? And when there are no more warthogs to be eaten, then that little goat looks pretty tasty, right? And for an animal that is on the brink of starvation, probably most of its existence, like, what is it going to do? I mean, it's almost common sense at that point. So,
Yeah.
So understanding that at the root, and I would say this was all part of my education process, is understanding that yes, there is that criminal layer, but really at the root of a lot of this stuff is desperation and a lack of access to resources. And I've tried to use that. I've made some mistakes in the last couple of years in terms of my approach to different projects that we've undertaken. But that is one thing I always try to remain like in the back of my head, that at the end of the day, like, there are some criminal elements involved, but there are a lot more desperate people doing desperate things because they're in a desperate situation, that things like, situations like guys like you and me can't even imagine.
Sure.
One of those things that makes it hard to relate, especially someone who's backpacked and traveled around like yourself. It's really hard to relate when you come back here and realize everything you could want is really within arm's reach.
Yeah.
And then you, like in my case, spent half my life in, the absolute middle of nowhere in Africa, where like people don't know if they're going to eat when they wake up. Like that kind of stuff. It's like, man. So I try really hard not to just be like, oh, poachers are bad, they need to be killed. Or, hey, everybody who's a wildlife criminal is some hardened criminal, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people are being taken advantage of by actual criminals. But the reality of the situation is that criminal component, that criminal layer, is not as big as everybody thinks it is. However, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be dealt with. That doesn't mean someone shouldn't come in and actually do something about it, which is where myself and my teams try to come in. Like we haven't done, with the exception of our first big project in Kenya, we haven't done anything in Africa or elsewhere that hasn't been a combination of leveraging our skills. A lot of the guys who work for me are guys that share similar background. So of course we're combining that skill and experience with like this just fundamental compassion and empathy. And like the last thing I want to do is go out and start murdering a bunch of poachers, right? Or a bunch of traffickers or whatever. Like, and you get a lot of people in this industry will be like, Tim Spalla he's an Army Ranger guy. He's going to come in and he's going to, mess this whole thing up, and people are going to get hurt, and it's going to just create this big, huge mess. And it's like, actually, yeah, I was an Army Ranger, but I'm also like an anthropologist, and I'm also like, I'm getting a grad degree in mental health. I have a fundamental understanding of what desperation can lead people to do. And so everything we do on the continent, when it comes to wildlife crime or building capacity within governments, we don't lose sight of that fact of like, yeah, we have all these skills, but to be able to leverage those skills from a foundation of empathy and compassion for the people that are in this situation, because no one asked to be born in any of these places.
No.
And so trying to remain aware of that and act, as that with a guiding principle is my response to all the military, he's militarizing this, or, he think, he's coming in doing James Bond stuff, or whatever. Like, okay, well, you can think whatever you want.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm trying to do what's right for both the people and the animals and the landscapes that we all want to see protected.
Yeah.
So that was all part of my education.
Sure.
And it really has been refined over the past couple of years. We've had some big projects. We've had a ton of small projects. Have done counter wildlife trafficking investigations pretty much everywhere from South Africa to South America to, I mean, everywhere in Africa and the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And a lot of that, I'd love to say, hey, I've been out running around the world chasing these bad dudes, but really that aha moment I had in 2015, it really landed on me, and it basically started this process that has by 2018, when my second child was born, I basically told Ashley, my wife, I'm like, I can't do this. I can't leave. I can't leave this house. I can't leave you guys. Yeah. I want to be a dad, I want to do all this stuff. And it gradually got to the point where I'm like, man, I love what I do for work. And I really love the impact that I feel like I'm having. But I can't imagine a world where my kids don't grow up with a dad. Right. And that I would miss out on that. Like, I realize I get only one shot to be their dad. So a lot of the work that we've done over the past couple of years has been me, on my phone or sitting in my exactly. I got an operations center built in my basement where like I manage a bunch of different field teams. So really the cool guy stuff is, unfortunately, those days might be over for me.
You might sneak one or two in here.
But I have some amazing guys who work for me and work with me that I wish, just from like security and, confidentiality and stuff like that, I really can't throw it out there because of guys are actually in the field. But I can't stress enough just how incredibly fortunate I am to have the people that work with me do what they do. They are,
so are we. Yeah, so we're definitely thankful for you guys. Who employs you? Who are the people that are like saying? Is it governments? Is it?
We've done everything from, we've worked with conservation nonprofits. We've worked with research agencies. We've done, Nat Geo is a big one. We've worked with some governments. We're about to do a big project. As a matter of fact, I'm right in the middle of putting all this together right now. Where our Horn of Africa work that we were doing for Nat Geo and the cheetahs and all that kind of stuff, we're about to transition that into a really a robust capacity building program. So in the process of that 2-year investigation that we did, we were able to identify a bunch of capability gaps. And as you can probably imagine, in the Horn of Africa, there's a ton of capability gaps. So we've captured all of that, and we put a bunch of plans together to go in and try to provide the Somalis and the Ethiopians and some of the other countries in the Horn with like some really targeted and focused support to account for those gaps.
Is it like such things like I was reading the article about like the traffickers will get to the water and like the boats can't even keep up with the poachers. So are you like?
So it's things like that. There's hard logistics. So boats, trucks, communications infrastructure, as you can probably imagine, there really isn't much out there. Sure. And our through the process of our work that we've been doing in that region, we've built a pretty robust early warning network of like dispersed field reporters that are observing and monitoring and reporting environmental crime activity. Part of this next phase will be to really kind of ramp up the infrastructure around that. So provide them with some more robust communications equipment. I guess I'll just leave it at that. But these are things that will allow for like 24 hours a day, real-time reporting kind of stuff. And then the training and everything that comes along with it. And then like on the government capacity side, we're going to build a environmental crime investigation unit for them. Basically an entity that can, upon receipt of a report of wildlife crime or environmental crime in progress, that they can actually hop in a truck and drive out to wherever that activity is reported to be taking place. And I know it's like, when you hear that, you're like, okay, that's the most common sense thing in the world. Like, why wouldn't that already exist? And I agree with you. Why not? Why doesn't it already exist? But the reality of the situation is they don't have it.
Right.
They don't have it, and nobody's giving them money to do it, and nobody's coming in to offer to help them build it, and no one's giving them the training, no one's giving them anything. Like there's no support. And in the case of Somaliland, which is actually an autonomous region of Somalia, they're not even recognized internationally. So they can't even get international aid. They can't do any of that. So it's literally them against some of the most robust and technically capable wildlife trafficking networks in Africa.
Wow.
And a lot of that goes right through Somaliland, and they have very limited defenses against it, much less the ability to be proactive and try to stop it. So that is part of my mission for the next phase of my project, is to help them fight back against these networks. So we've gone in, our first 2 years was spent mapping and basically identifying who's who, you know, in the zoo kind of thing. I mean, we even took down one of their biggest traffickers.
I saw it, yeah.
We helped the Somalilanders, we assisted them in taking down one of their bigger traffickers. And that was one of the first times it's ever happened. As a matter of fact, that trafficker got a sentence, the longest wildlife crime related sentence that Somaliland has ever handed out, fell on that guy's shoulders, right?
How many years? How many years are we talking? So people,
and so that's crazy. So
yeah.
Expectation management.
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
4 years though, in a country where there's no precedent for that kind of prison term for wildlife crime is a big deal. Not to mention this particular individual has a lot of strong, influential clan connections and familial connections. So the fact that they were able to make that sentence stick in spite of all the political and clan pressure that probably came with it is a big deal. Yeah. And to me, it signifies that these guys are the real deal and they want to work on this. Like if people are willing to come in and help, because you got to think, these guys that live there, the locals, the government officials, the community leaders, these guys are on the front lines. They pay very real consequences for everything that happens over there. Guys like me, I can envision these big strategies and put everything together and kind of maestro everything from the background. But at the end of the day, these are real human beings putting themselves between the animals or the endangered landscapes and people who would seek to exploit them. Yeah. And the people who would seek to exploit them have guns, have other people, you know, that they can call on. Like there's a lot of real risk and in danger in this kind of work. So for them, for that population to be as proactive as they are, in spite of the risk involved, is honestly one of the things that motivates me. Like, I get to drop my boys off at school every day. I pick them up every day. I make them lunch. I read them books and tuck them in at night. Like I have this really safe life now for the first time since I can remember. Meanwhile, there's guys over there in Somaliland that are just doing this every day and they don't know what is going to be the consequences, you know, like they face those risks head on. So as long as there's guys over there willing to do that, you know, I've been sitting here trying to figure out what can I all do? What am I capable of doing to help them out? Because it's one of those things I'll do whatever I have to do.
Yeah, I think you're doing an awesome job, man. I wish there was more environmental badasses like yourself out there. What do you envision the next 20 years looking like in that region? From, let's say, Central Africa, I mean, all of Africa, really.
You know, that's a tough question.
I know.
Because I think about the last 10 years, and that's about how long I've been working on and off in the Horn of Africa. It ebbs and flows. And with political stability comes, you know, economic opportunity, and comes openness and inclusion and all this kind of stuff, right? But like, as you're seeing now, if anybody's paying attention, there's a lot of political instability in Ethiopia. Southern Somalia is typically a mess, like it always is, as they try to iron out, like, what are they going to be as a political entity. We are fortunate enough in Somaliland that they are, relatively speaking, one of the most stable countries in Africa, with like a very democratic institutions and a belief in like democratic principles. And culturally, they're just amazing people. But the reality is, I think, at least for me, I think there are forces at work that are beyond our control, that have already been set in motion, before any of us were born, probably.
Climate wise?
Climate. I think that'll be something that continues to drive political and economic instability in the region. And as long as there's no answer for that, I don't think there's going to be much change. And as a matter of fact, if you go back 10 years, I mean, it's simple math at this point. You go back 10 years and, the cheetah's habitat is this, right? And all you've seen is it reduce over time, over time, over time. And there is absolutely nothing that I see that is going to reverse that, with the potential exception of some of the work that we're trying to do through the Horn of Africa Conservation Alliance, which is an organization we started. It actually came out of the National Geographic work, where we're hoping to not just do environmental crime and wildlife trafficking and all that kind of stuff, but we're also hoping to like impact some of the climate change issues that are happening, which, it might just be a drop in the bucket, but I figure somebody, because if you look around there, no one is really doing anything.
Yeah.
But that is my fear. My fear is that the forces that are shaping and pressuring the populations of the Horn of Africa are now beyond any one person's control, and they're beyond any one country's control. They might even be beyond humanity's control. And as long as that remains the case, I think we're really just fighting to save time, to save as much of what we can save before it's gone for good. And I had somebody ask me the other day, like, it's pretty awesome, like what you're doing and everything like that, but like, what is the point? Like, what's the outcome? Like, don't you get discouraged? It's like nothing but bad news. And I have to acknowledge, yeah, it is. I mean, it's pretty depressing at times. I think a lot about my kids,
man,
not to mention the kids in Somaliland or Somalia, but I think a ton about my kids, and realizing that, I mean, I have been so fortunate. Dude, I have been in every corner of Africa, and I have seen and touched some of the most incredible things that, like, it's hard for me to even put into words. Like, I don't even bother half the time. And thinking, the thought of my boys, they're 4 and 6, the thought of my boys never getting the opportunity to experience any of that.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, man. It's totally heartbreaking. And so that's why I responded. I'm like, yeah, it sucks. It's depressing. I think about my kids and how they'll never get to do all this stuff. But at the same time, I also have to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And I realize that, yeah, it's a losing fight. Like we're just trying to save time and save as much as we can before it's gone for good. But I also won't sleep if I don't try to do something.
Yeah.
Right. Like if there's not something, and when I say I have given a lot, man,
I'm sure
I have cashed in my retirement to keep these programs floating. Wow. I have begged and borrowed and stealed from every organization I could think of that might be able to help us. Like, and more often than not, over the course of the past 6 years, we've reached out to other organizations to help us, and we are told no constantly. And so we've had to really scrape a lot of the programming we've done together just from nothing. Again, like I cashed in retirement, we've sold assets. Like, I've done a lot of things just trying to keep this stuff alive.
That's so amazing.
The risk of not sleeping at night.
Yeah.
Anyway, but my thought is, I've become a big universe guy. So my thought is, at some point, maybe not in my lifetime, but at some point, the return on investment will be apparent to someone, hopefully my kids. But if my life is spent fighting this, losing battle, I'm cool with that. Like, it is what it is. I feel like I don't have much of a choice. Like, as long as and I'm also fortunate enough, again, I get to take my kids to school every day. Pick them up every day, make them dinner, read them books. I get to hang out with my wife every night on the couch, and I don't have to worry about somebody kicking my door in or walking out in the morning and getting shot by a wildlife poacher or trafficker or something like that. I don't have anything to complain about. I have everything someone could possibly ask for. And then I have all this leftover time, energy, and resources. It's like, why not take that and try to do something good with it? So,
Man, it's so important. I mean, you're speaking to my heart. It's exactly what I'm doing as a wildlife conservation photographer. Is I'm trying to go out and photograph these things and be a part of it and connect people like yourselves with others. And I often feel it's a losing battle, but I'm not going to stop. Like there's no way. I couldn't sleep at night either if I switched jobs and became a banker or something that just was like focusing on just things, and I wasn't being, like a bigger part in the fight for this planet, and not for myself, because I think a lot of these things will be around by the time I'm gone. But I don't have children myself, but like for your kids, like I often think about that, like how I couldn't imagine explaining to my nieces and nephews, like, I'm sorry I didn't do anything, now you can't see elephants, like like that thought is just like, man, I can't for myself live with that. So I really appreciate all the work you're doing. Where can people go to support the work you're doing? If they want to write you big checks, you can go out there and really fight the fight. Like, where can they go to support the very important work that you're doing, man?
Well, if anyone wants to write a big check, I will give you my mailing address. You just send that right over. No, so we have a couple of places. So and believe me, this is so outside of my realm. I'm not even doing this interview is so much more public than what I'm used to being. But the Net Geo thing kind of blew my cover. So I'm done with it now. Yeah. So we have some social media pages that folks could connect with. On Facebook, you just search Horn of Africa Conservation Alliance. Same thing on Instagram and Twitter. I don't know if there's any others, and I'm not even aware. I don't know anything about social media.
Yeah, those are the top three big ones.
Yeah, so you'll find us there. We have a GoFundMe page. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we've reached out to so many nonprofits and all these people that are in this space, and we just constantly get told no. So unfortunately, we don't have the ability to give tax-free donations yet. However, we are in the process of transitioning the Horn of Africa Conservation Alliance into a 501c3. But in the meantime, we do have a GoFundMe set up just for anybody who wants to throw a couple bucks here and there or whatever. It's pretty easy.
Where can they find
that? GoFundMe.
Yeah,
I think if you just go on GoFundMe and search Horn of Africa, you should find us. And I can send you a link if you want to add it to the show files. We've got a Venmo and one of the other ones. I don't remember what it is, but I don't use any of that stuff. But we've got it all set up to see if just folks would be willing to help out. We've had everyone from mom and pop, literally mom and pop. My mother-in-law and my mom and my dad have contributed money, but also, I mean, we have Sunday schools that have reached out, wanting to know how they can support. I've done a bunch of media engagement back home in Northeast Iowa, and as a kid who grew up on a farm, loving animals, and had no connection with the outside world, I just look at this as like, man, this is my opportunity to go back and like connect with maybe a little guy that was like me once upon a time, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And we've had a ton of people reach out from my hometown area, just your normal everyday people who are saying, damn, like I want to get involved. Like, this is amazing. A, how the hell did you come from, Decorah, Iowa, and end up doing all this stuff? But like, B, how can we help? Like, how can we
and that's, I saw the work that you're doing. I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. I gotta get what he's doing out there. Everyone, if you want to find a glimpse of what Tim is doing, he part of his work was featured in the September issue of National Geographic. You can go on National Geographic's website. They'll give you 3 free. I did it this morning. I was looking up the article. I wanted to read it pretty heavily, and they'll give you 3 free articles if you sign up. So there's no excuse not to go and get it checked out. I highly recommend subscribing to them anyway, but definitely do that. And then, Tim, if there's any way I can help you, please feel free to reach out. My audience members, I'm going to put in the show notes where they can find you, where they can find the Horn of Africa Conservation Alliance. And I know you got to get off running, go to pick up the kids. So I want to be conscious. Of your
Got a
time.
play date today.
Yeah,
Big
that's
day.
awesome. Yeah, big day. So I'll end it here. People, just check Tim out, see the work he's doing. And Tim, I really appreciate all the work you've done for this planet, for this country, and for your family. So that's a huge, you're a good man. And I hope to have a beer with you one day, because I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
I definitely. And Derek, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've taken a lot from our correspondence over the past couple of weeks, and appreciate what you do as well, and giving guys like me a voice. It's much appreciated. So
absolutely, man. We're all in this together. So thank you, everyone, for joining me back here at the Art of Actual Change. I told you today's episode was going to be amazing. Tim was a fantastic guest. He is on a mission to save this planet. And I really hope that you took something out of today's episode, and that we can get him some funding, some attention, some media, get the word out on his mission. It is an incredibly important mission, especially with the times that we're facing right now with climate change and the loss of species across the planet. Tim's work is fundamental in protecting the wildlife that is left on this planet. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it across all the platforms that you can think of: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I don't care. Let's get it out there. You guys are awesome. Thank you for your support. And you know what time it is. Go out there and make an actual change in your world or the world around you.